Well, Shabbat Shalom and welcome. This is VBS Torah Study for Shabbos, and I'm here. I'm Rabbi Ed Feinstein in now sunny Southern California,
Thank
welcoming
God.
my dear friend Rabbi Mark Gelman of South Florida. Mark, Shabbat Shalom. Good to see you.
Shabbat shalom, my friend. How are you? And by the way,
Hmm?
Mazel Tov on the
Thank you.
dedication of the new, revised, uplifted, better, new version.
Business class is what I like to say. So this weekend, Valley Beth Shalom, our wonderful synagogue, having now spent almost 4 years outside of our sanctuary, is returning to it's called the Niznik Sanctuary for the Niznik family that dedicated it, and the Glazer Hall. Wonderful facilities that have now been upgraded and updated and made beautiful. The lighting, the sound, and we now have these remarkable video screens so you could watch the whole service. And the
That's
question all my friends are asking is, are we going to have instant replay, with a telespotter, they'll put a line, show you where the first down is. So we're looking forward to enjoying to play with these tools, these new tools and new
well,
toys.
use them, Tit Chadesh, use them in good health.
Amen. And apropos of that, which is wonderfully relevant, we're at
Yeah,
the end of the book of Exodus. The first five parshiot of the book of Exodus deal with the creation of the Mishkan. Last week in Parshat Truma, God said to us, Asuli mikdash v'shachanti bitocham. Make for me a holy place, and I will dwell there with you, among you, within you. And so last week we created the Ark of the Covenant, we created the altar and the menorah. This week we start with the menorah and we move on to the vestments of the priest. And this raises all sorts of wonderfully interesting, searching questions. So let's begin with the first one. Among the vestments of the priest is a breastplate with 12 precious stones on them. This is called Urim and Tumim, and it was used in ancient Israel, at least according to the text of the book of Samuel, book of Kings. It was used as a sort of instrument of divination. If you needed God's blessings for a particularly difficult decision, you could ask God to help you using this thing. Somehow the stones would light up and tell you what you were looking for and the answer you were looking for. Now, we don't tend to think that Judaism has this tradition. There is a law in the book of Deuteronomy that says we're not supposed to consult ghosts and wizards and witches and spirits, but that is a temptation. I think it's an impulse that's almost impossible to resist. Even today, with all of the science that surrounds us, people still have, rabbit's feet, and people still check their astrological forecast, the zodiac forecast in the morning newspaper. People still do these things because there's this element of irrational luck, irrational impulses within us. So, Mark, talk to us about magic and divination and soothsaying and superstition within the Jewish tradition.
yeah, that's well set up. Basically, there's two choices we have in life about what's going to happen. One is freedom, and one is fate.
Hmm.
All right. If freedom is the basic law of the future, it means the only thing that's going to happen is what we choose to happen. What happens as a result of what we do. It's all our free choice. And we have that in the Torah. I have set before you life and death, choose life. So there's definitely that, let's call that the red thread in Judaism of freedom. It's there. However, as you said, there's a deep human need to believe in another way, not freedom, but fate. Fate is no matter what, of course, no matter what we do, God has a plan, and it's going to be God's plan that's going to work its way out, and it's going to happen, and nothing we can do is going to alter that plan. That's fate. I mean, there are Christian theologians like John Calvin who built their entire theology on fate and on the notion that there is a a group of the chosen that God, and they'll be saved, and the rest of people are damned. So there's a definite appeal to fate. And since I'm in this now multi-week habit of trying to defend the most archaic, irrelevant, impossible biblical stuff, I'm going to defend that. I'm going to defend fate today, and you can take freedom, because that's the one that's the right answer. And I don't care if people don't think what I have is the right answer, because I'm retired and I don't care.
Oh, come
But
on, you care. Come
I'm
on.
just kidding. Oh, but here it is.
Stop that. Yeah.
Oh,
You're
here it
better
is.
than that. Yeah.
Here it is. Here it is. There is more than is imagined in our philosophy, Horatio, to quote the Bard. There's stuff that happens that you can't exactly pin to human choice. And one of the most obvious alternatives to human choice is that God has a plan. And that no matter what we do, we can't alter that plan. And I offer as proof several things. First, an old Yiddish saying, Man tracht und Gott lacht. Man plans and God laughs, which is, of course, a way of saying, yeah, big shot. You plan whatever you think is going to happen, and God is laughing at you because God is going to do what God is going to do. And the second option, the second proof that I offer for fate, is that certain things happen that have no explanation. There are in my column, which you can get, God Squad articles by Mark Gelman. It's been 30 years now that I've written this column with Tom Hartman when he was alive, may his memory be blessed, and now alone without Tommy. And a lot of the columns recently have been about what we call God winks, which are experiences that readers write in about of stuff that just makes no sense. But it happens. You know, books flying off shelves. Guy visits his grandmother's, great-grandmother's grave in an old cemetery in New England, and it's covered with moss. He calls his brother, who's looking in the rest of the cemetery, to come by. The brother comes by, and he says, this is our great-grandmother's stone. You can't read it because of the moss all over it. And the brother says, what moss? And he takes a picture for me. And he shows the second picture. There's no moss on it. Mm. It's only 5 minutes after the first picture. So it's bizarre. It's really bizarre. There's no way that could happen, but it happened. And I've had some weird experiences with Tommy coming to see me after he died. So there's stuff that happens that we just can't explain. Mm. Doctors will tell you, I don't know a single doctor who doesn't have a story of what they euphemistically call spontaneous remission of a disease. You're taking care of someone who's gravely ill, then all of a sudden they're not sick anymore. Why? Who knows? So and then if you look at macro issues like the survival of the Jewish people, how the heck did we survive? And every single great empire of the world has collapsed around us, and we're still here. And then at the very moment of our greatest despair, the state of Israel, after the Holocaust, the state of Israel all of a sudden is founded at the one political moment when there was enough support from both Russia and America to allow the state to be recognized. How does that happen? You say, oh, well, there's all these rational explanations. Yeah, there are. I don't think they add up to a state of Israel.
So what are you saying? That there's a quality of of
Fate.
of contingency in the world, of openness to things that aren't rationally
Yeah.
understandable in the
Yes.
world? Okay.
Yeah. That's my point.
And because of that, what do we, and so now come back
Because of
to the
that,
question.
the
So that,
Urim and the Thummim
yeah.
have a certain relevance.
Mm-hmm.
That in the ancient world, this is how they tried to access that world of fate.
Mm.
Now, the fact that the Urim and the Thummim were just dice or bones, or the commentators go all over about what they really were, chances are that they were some kind of dice, some things that had markings on them. And David consults them in the Torah, and to see whether the people of the town he's in are going to surrender him, and the Urim says yes, they're going to surrender you, so get out of there. And in First Samuel, the 28, 23, we got King Saul, who's thinking he's going to die in battle, and he asked the prophet Samuel to call up the witch of Endor.
No, the other way around. The witch of Endor calls up the prophet Samuel,
Oh, yeah.
and
Right.
Samuel
But
says to him, yeah,
am I going to be killed in the battle? And they
yeah.
said,
Even
yes,
after death, Samuel doesn't let go of his rage. It's just a
exactly.
terrible
And to
story.
take care to kill David. And so basically you have these stories of consulting witches and consulting augurers, even though it's prohibited in the Torah. So what do you make of all this? I make of it that even if the Urim and the Thummim didn't work, there's some things that do work. And there's there's two real statements here that you have to grapple with.
Balloons everywhere.
What?
It's okay. It's okay. It's the computer. Go ahead.
Just going freaking out here.
It's your birthday. Go ahead. You want to know irrational things. That's
Oh, well, that's like God saying, yeah, keep going, Gelman.
you'll
You're
go.
on this
You're
one.
on a roll. Go ahead.
Okay. So what I'm saying here is that there is something about the future that is fixed. Look, and proof, the final proof on freedom and fate that I offer up, not to resolve this issue, but to just lay it out for people to chew on, is the Unisana Tokef. What more do you want on the issue of freedom and fate? Here we have a prayer on our holiest day, which says, God knows who's going to die by fire or by strangling or by water or by what? No matter what you do, this is what's going to happen to you? Yes, that's what the prayer says. So you've got this, we call it fatalistic or deterministic. Both terms are used to describe fatalism in philosophy. And I think there's something to it. I think we don't completely control our fate. And I think our freedom to choose things does not completely determine what will happen. And
I'm not going to argue with the basic point that there are things we don't understand and that our actions are not completely determined. Our actions don't completely determine what happens to us. But I do want to push back on one point because
good.
I think it's possible, and I don't think it's just possible. I think it's actually not infrequent that people become slaves to their superstitions. That people begin to say, well, if I'm not in control of my own destiny, if there is this power of fate, then I'm going to give myself up to this power of fate. And they let go of a sense of responsibility. They let go of a sense of initiative and essentially become slaves. They become slaves to this thing. Now, there always has been in Jewish tradition, despite there's two forces in Jewish tradition. There's a very strong sort of normative force pushing back against magic, against superstition, against fate. because there always was a great sense that we must be responsible for our choices and carry that responsibility and consider our choices carefully. The great champion of that, of course, was Maimonides, who said,
Yes.
"We are that my character is the accumulation of my choices, and it can't be blamed on my parents. It can't be blamed on my circumstances. I am the accumulation of my choices." And it's a strong statement, and maybe too extreme a statement, as you've pointed out. But on the other hand, there's always been a strong sort of thread through Jewish folk tradition of superstition. I just even my mother, who was not a believer, who would tell you she's not a believer, when we ever bought a new car, would tie a red ribbon around the steering column, a red bendel, a Kanai bendel, right? And because she still maintained these old Eastern European kinds of superstitions that there were these forces, demons and Dybbuk and devils and things that would come and steal away good fortune. And the problem with that, if it's innocent, if it's a red string, a red bendel around your steering column, that's one thing. But the woman who comes to me, and this happened to me more than once, and she said to me, "I need you to sell me a red string to tie around my wrist and bless it." And I said, "What?" And she said, "Well, my daughter is having a kid, and I'm worried about the pregnancy, and I want God to protect her." And I said, "I'll pray with you, and we'll go talk to the doctors and make sure she's getting the medical care, but a red string?" I said, "How much does it cost a red string?" And she said, $26. I said, "My God, I can sell you a box of string for $26." I mean, at what point do we become slaves to our superstitions? At what point do we abandon our rationality, number one, but more than that, our responsibility, our responsibility. And
That's
again, I'm trying to distinguish between innocent superstition. All right, you're afraid of black cats, be gesund, and Kenai Nahara things, right? And more serious situations where people sort of let go of their sense of responsibility in the world and become attached to these things way more than they ought to be.
okay. That's a lovely pushback, and I do take all your points, except I think you made a little bit of a shifty move there that I have to call you out on.
Go ahead.
This this is not superstition that I'm talking about.
Okay.
This is fatalism. That's
Yeah.
a different thing. Different thing.
No, but fatalism too becomes a slavery, doesn't it?
It can be,
It means that I
but
don't see
when we
myself as,
say when we say superstition, a la Stevie Wonder, when we when you believe in things you don't understand and you suffer, superstition is the way. The truth of the matter is, I'm not talking about superstition.
yeah,
Bubba mices is
yeah,
what you're talking about. Bubba mices are not fatalism. Bubba, they are a form of it, but it's low class fatalism.
right.
I'm talking about on the highest level. Am I going to live another year? Let's just take it at that. Let's go straight to the Unisonatoka. There's two possibilities. One is with health, with good practices, eating right, getting rid of processed foods, walking more than you sit, chances are you'll live another year. But you may not. You may get hit by a bus. You may have some, like I had, a gastric bleed that I nearly died from
Yeah.
last spring in May. I'm still recovering mentally from this thing
Hmm.
because I knew how close to death I was.
Hmm.
And I'm sitting there and I say, so this might be it. And I said the vidui and the final confession. And and I said, the doctor said, look, you have diverticulosis, which are bumpy bumps in your colon, and sometimes they break. And if they break, sometimes we can't find where, sometimes they resolve themselves, and sometimes they don't resolve themselves and you bleed to death. Well, that's, and has really nothing to do with your health. it's just you drew the bad card that day.
Right.
But the Malach HaMavis was interested in you that day, the angel of death. And so what I'm saying is there's an element, and I don't think we ever face this honestly enough at the high holidays as a reason for why people show up and as a reason for what's in their heart. They're saying, God, I know I may die this year,
Yeah.
or people I love may die this year, which is even a greater fear. And I'm praying that that doesn't happen.
Right.
And so I think there must be a way for us to cope with that fear that isn't irrational, that is an appeal to the source of fate, which is God. And to say, God, I'm not going to say asking you is the result of a childish faith, infantile religion, a slave mentality to this superstitions. I'm not taking that course, God. I'm saying there is an element of the future that you and you alone control. If it is your will that this is my last year here on planet Earth, I thank you for all the blessings of my life. If it is not your will, I pray that you might protect me and give me another year of life.
Right.
I think
Right.
that's the
Unatana
real
Tokev.
prayer.
So the prayer we're talking about is Unatana Tokev, which is a Rosh Hashanah prayer. And the reason why we're talking about this is we began this week's Torah portion. Moses and Bezalel create this Urim and Tumim, this sort of divination device, and we're talking about whether divination and magic is actually part of the Jewish tradition. So I just want to capture where we came from.
Yeah.
I agree with you. The first paragraph of Unatana Tokev says exactly what you said. The human condition is vulnerability. The human life is terribly fragile. It's a reality we don't want to face. Most of the year, in fact, 364 days of the year, who wants to hear about this? We want to think that we're safe and secure and protected. And we don't want to understand that how fragile human existence is, how fragile our daily routines are, how in some ways really trivial are the things that we worry about when given the real stakes of human existence. That's exactly true. The question is, and here you're right, what do we do with that? So the person who says, what I worry about is the person who says, well, if human life is that fragile and I am that vulnerable, then to hell with it. I'm not going to try. I'm not going to give it. I'm not going to live my life. I'm not going to help another human being. I'm not going to contribute something to the betterment of the world. That's the person I worry about. The person who is fatalistic. That word is such a great word, fatalistic, which means I give in, I surrender. And I've made an argument again and again that the opposite of Judaism is surrender, is to say, that doesn't mean that there aren't moments of acceptance. Certainly, there are moments when you say, we have to accept where we are and accept the reality that we're dealing with. But to surrender and to say that I can't do anything about it, that bothers me a lot.
Okay. Is there room in your theory
Yeah.
for something more mature than the couch?
Right.
I'm just going to sit on the couch, to hell with everything, because
Well, no, I'm going to say that I think Unatana Tokev tells us, because the next line of Unatana Tokev says, Tshuva tfilat tzedakah mavirin et roa gzera. The original version of the prayer, by the way, wasn't that.
Yes, I know.
The original version of the prayer was Tshuva tfilat tzedakah, repentance and prayer and tzedakah and charity as a giving. Mivatlin et gzera, cancels God's decree. And then you have this terrible problem of innocent, wonderful, terrific, delicious, good human beings who suffer terribly. And you say, well, obviously, he didn't do enough tshuva or tefillah or tzedakah. It's a terrible thing to say. So the rabbis changed it. They said, no, it's not that you can change God's decree for Gelman. Your diverticulitis was coming whether you pray or not. What it does is different. It mivarin et roa hagzera. It gives you the capacity to deal. It gives you the capacity to cope with human vulnerability, with the vulnerability of the human condition without losing your mind. And
Yeah,
what it does is, and tshuva, the first thing it says is you can control your own character. You are the person that you choose to become. In that case, Rambam is right. You can't change your fate necessarily, but you can decide how you're going to live in the world. And you and I know people who are so fatalistic that they're just mean people. And on the other hand, you and I know people who understand that their vulnerability, but it makes them gentle and it makes them generous. And tefillah, as you say, we can pray and I think, to me, because it's my background, we pray together. Last night I was at a Shiva minyan. We've all been to Shiva minyan. Family has suffered something egregious, terrible, the loss of a dearly loved member of the family. And it's so wonderful to see a community of friends gather together and hold them together, lift them up. Beautiful thing to see. And tzedakah means we can make a difference in the life of the person who's sitting next to you. We can make some difference. I think that's the answer to this.
yeah, I think you're right.
That's my answer to fatalism.
I think we can agree on that. Let's take one final step, and that's into this notion of the big day Kodesh.
All right, so the priests, right? In this Torah portion, Moses dresses the priest. So we have a description of what the priest wears.
Precise description.
Very precise, down to his gatkas, right? Down to his undergarments, right? So talk to me about rabbinic gatkas.
Okay, so basically it's a whole thing: linen pants, linen tunic, a purple woven ephod,
A jacket.
beaten out gold plate with 12 precious stones, each for one of the tribes of Israel, and in the middle a box for the Urim and the Thummim, a headband, and then a white turban, and over the turban across the forehead, a gold band, which was engraved Kadosh Ladonai, holy for God. And over the whole thing, a robe with golden pomegranate bells.
Sounds pretty spectacular, huh?
And imagine this: it's the temple in Jerusalem on Yom Kippur, and the sun is setting, and the gates are closing, and the high priest is standing with the sun setting behind his fingers, and he's making this sign with his fingers, and the sun is coming through his fingers over the gold, over the white, over the purple, and down onto the people.
Spectacle.
Now, I want to say something. Betty and I, in one of our trips to Israel, went to France at the end, and we went to Chartres and the great Gothic cathedral there, and we snuck in, and we snuck to the second level, and there's this big mass going on, and the sun is coming through the Rosetta stained glass window, and 300-foot vault of the ceiling, and all of the clergy in purple and scarlet, and I said, we don't have anything like this in Judaism. We don't have any drama. So the first thing about the Big Day Kodesh that I want to lift up is we need more drama. I'm defending biblical Judaism in this whole thing, and I'm saying, yeah, we need more drama. And I think that somehow we have to have it. The second thing I want to say is people dress like shlubs. People dress inappropriately for synagogue. One of the most powerful articles in my column was a Black woman from Mississippi who wrote in and said, what happens with church now? We used to dress in our Sunday best, and we had women at the door measuring the girls' hem length that had to be long enough with the rulers, otherwise they couldn't get in. And now people, she says, come in torn T-shirts, and they look like bums. What happened to Sunday best? And I think that's a question I want to ask our viewers as well. do you dress appropriately? And how do you think I should dress? And how do you think Ed should dress? Do you think we should dress in suits? Do you think we should have robes, which really was copied from Protestant ministers? Do you think we should have a big talesum over a suit or over robes? Or do you like the thin talis? There's a question of, so I've heard young rabbis, they all say to me, no, I don't want any of that because I don't want to be separated from the people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm defending biblical Judaism, so I say, wrong. One of the purposes of clergy is to be separated from the people.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you bury somebody's husband or wife or father or mother, or God forbid, a child, you're not part of their ordinary world.
Mm-hmm.
You're what would be called a shaman in the forests of the Amazon. And you'd live on the outside of the community because you're contacting the holy. So I'm in favor of rabbinic garb that does distinguish you between you and the congregation. I don't want to dress in a suit which makes me look like the guy who just said to you, I'm sorry, but your mortgage has not been approved. So I think that's wrong. And I think we need something more Chartres-esque. That's my point of view.
So I want to go, this is a very important point. So
Okay.
first of all, I want to just generalize this. It's not just shul, by the way. Although, like you, I grew up with a mother who had a very strong idea of shul clothes.
Really?
You had to wear something special to synagogue.
Yeah.
I was never permitted to wear sneakers to the synagogue.
Never.
Hebrew
Never.
school, yes, but if I went into the regular shul, I wasn't permitted. Now, all my bar mitzvah kids wear sneakers. In
Yeah.
fact, some kid
On the bima?
all of them. They're nice. They're new ones. They're snapped. They're expensive. But I looked at a kid and I couldn't help myself. I channeled my mother and I said, "Sneakers on the bima?" That's what I said. And the mother looked at me and said, "They're very nice." I said, "Yeah, no, they're very." But it's not just that. People used to, when they get on an airplane, used to put on a coat and tie.
Yes, true
People,
enough.
if you see pictures of baseball games,
Guys had hats.
men, coats, ties, and hats to a ball game.
Yes.
Right? When you did business, you were, I mean, there was a time when a man would not be seen on the street without a coat and tie. I mean, so the whole culture has become very, very comfortable, let's call it that, right?
Informal.
I'm teaching, I teach, I've been working with one of the high schools, with the Milken Community High School, and the kids wear pajamas.
What?
Kids wear pajamas to school. Like, pajamas are like now school clothes. Like, what? Like, again, my mother would never let me do that. There were school clothes, you had first day of school, you wear some nice clothes, make a nice impression. So the whole culture is big, but that's part of the problem. The other thing you said, which is so important about this, young rabbis want to feel like I'm one of the community. Call me by my name. Call me Ed, right?
Yes.
I did that as a kid when I started out as a rabbi. And you very quickly discover that you're not. Very quickly discover this idea of the shaman. You very quickly discover that people look at you differently because you have powers. Now, they know, these are really smart people. They know that I don't have magical powers, and yet I'm the one who speaks at the funeral. I'm the one who speaks under the chuppah. I'm the one who blesses the baby. At that moment particularly, I am invested with a power that the community invests in me. And of course, the notion was you became a rabbi, you got smicha. They put their hands on you because you were invested with that mythical, magical, mystical power. The community, you carry the community's prayer, you carry the community's hope. And part of being a clergy person is recognizing that and not abusing it. Not abusing it, God forbid, to manipulate people, but also not degrading it. So to take it on and to realize that people need that. When I walk into a hospital room, people want me to be the person who carries some power of healing with me, not curing, that's the doctor, but healing, which is a psychological, spiritual feeling. And the dress recognizes that. I think you're absolutely right about that. The
Yeah,
dress recognizes that. I'm kind of jealous, by the way. I'm sure that you were too, that you're that that Father Hartman of blessed memory got to
he
wear
had
it.
the collar.
He
Yeah.
got to wear something that people knew right away he was one of them, right? I was getting on an airplane and I'm watching this guy who's got a collar on, right? And I have the same credentials that he does, and that he gets treated in a very different way than me. Because me, I'm just the guy in, 13D, trying to get my bag into the overhead compartment. And that's Father so and so, brother so and so.
Yeah, I'm much more formal than you are. And I think there's a lot of people, I mean, I pay special attention when I'm at Valley Beth Shalom about people who say, is Eddie here? Or the people who say, is Rabbi Feinstein here? Um, I'm very interested in how that breaks out. In my synagogue, 35 years, I don't think there were three people. I don't think there was one person who called me Mark.
Hmm.
I was Rabbi Gelman.
Right.
Now, if we had some friends in the synagogue, which also is another thing I talk to young rabbis about, don't expect to have a lot of friends in the synagogue um, because of this shaman thing. It's very hard for people to get around it. But when we were out with friends who were in the synagogue, they would call me Mark, of course. But basically, everyone called me Rabbi Gelman, and I was okay with that. I actually thought, you know, that recognizes a difference, which isn't arrogance on my part, and it isn't the result, like you say, of magical powers, but it is the result of being in a different category.
Yeah. There's something magical about it. I mean, magical in the sense of we feel something. It may not be metaphysically magical or certainly not physically magical, but I got to tell you, this. I go to a wedding. First of all, I'm somebody there. I'm leading a wedding service. I'm standing under the chuppah. I can feel it. I can
Oh yeah,
feel the investiture of a community's prayer.
100%.
I'm channeling a community's prayers and hope for this couple into this moment. I'm carrying that power. When I get up to do a funeral service, I'm carrying the power
No
of
question.
healing to people in
No
grief.
question.
When I hold a kid to bless a kid at a bris or a baby naming, it's there. When I walk into a hospital room, it's there.
There is where it really is.
It's
You
true.
put your hands on the head,
Yeah, I hold a hand. I hold a hand and I say, let's say a prayer together.
you feel it.
I feel it. They feel
I've
it.
had people say to me, Rabbi, when you did that, I put my hand on their forehead. I felt something go through my body.
Right. That's why, by the way, the woman with the red string who came to me and said, I'm worried about my daughter. She's going to give
Yeah.
birth and I want a red string. And I said, no, I'm not going to give you a red string. Let me hold your hand. We held hands. We prayed together. I said a prayer with her. I said, we pray for this mother. We pray for this child. We pray for this moment. We held hands. We closed our eyes. We said a prayer together. Yeah, I know there's a magic to this, but she needed that. She needed to know that the
Yes.
community that I represent and the tradition that I represent is on her side and acknowledges her fear, her anxiety, but is also there with her to hold her and to protect her. And it's different than with just a member of the community. It's different. It has a different feeling to it. And
No
that I
question.
think is very true. That's why I think, and by the way, I'll give one more piece of this. So I have a young friend who's training to be a physician. You know what they do when kids in the third year of medical school, you have a white coat ceremony?
Oh, really?
Because you know this, a third year medical student begins clinics. They're going to be doing medicine, sort of apprentice medicine, and they have a ceremony called the white coat ceremony, where you come with your family and they literally wrap you in a white coat that has your name on it that says Dr. Gelman on it. And when you walk into an exam room, you walk in, you wash your hands, you say, hello, my name is Dr. And because we look at doctors that way, we feel
Yes, we
that way,
do.
right? When a person becomes a judge, I've been at those ceremonies too. They're wrapped in a robe. This notion of sacred clothing is not ancient. We still do it, right? Police officers wear a badge, right? A judge wears a robe. A physician wears a white coat. We
Well, you
have.
don't wear a robe.
I don't wear a robe on Yom Kippur. On Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, we wear robes. No, but I have a giant tallis that I wear.
Yeah, me too. It's like a full swimmer, I call
The
it.
big, big, big tallis. And but it says, and but I adopt that role even when I'm not even at weddings I wear a tallis, which is not necessary, but it had a funny experience once. I went to a wedding and I was wearing a tuxedo because I was going to stay for the dinner. And a woman saw me and says, "Oh, good. Would you bring me a dry martini with two olives?" And I
Oh,
said,
that's so
"Yes,
funny.
ma'am." So I brought her the dry martini and the two olives. And then I did the wedding. And afterwards she came up to me and said, "You're the," I said, "Yeah." "But you brought me." I said, "Well, you look thirsty. What do you want?" So now I wear a
So
tallis. No
funny.
one should mistake me for a cocktail waiter.
That is very funny.
So this week, Mark, let's put on something. Let's put on some magical clothing.
Okay.
Let's take on the persona and let's share blessings with each other. Um,
Amen.
Everyone, take care. Mark, a good Shabbos. Stay well.
Good Shabbos, my friend.